specifics in terms of maybe tabs or procedural reviews that might be helpful, uh, or do you want us to set priorities?
I think I also just wanted to invite Kevin back on too, because since they will be the folks doing a lot of the data breakdowns, just to make sure that you're all clear. And I think for some of these, just to respond to your question, um, we are able to dig deeper on some of these and present more to you at the next subcommittee meeting, in terms of some of the research and perhaps drilling down. And again, if we don't have the specific data sets, it may be some of the more background research and talking to experts in some of these issues, and then developing more of the content of these sections by the next subcommittee meetings, which we're actually hoping to hold in June, May and June. And so the idea would be to present a more detailed outline for the full board to discuss in April, but then to come back to this subcommittee after we've been able to drill down more on some of the research. And that may involve talking with some of you individually, but I think, and others in my team can chime in, I think we have enough to go on in terms of starting to pursue some of these topics and figuring out where the breakdown, which breakdowns we might want to do, and how we can report on those and get more research. But Kevin, I also wanted to give you a chance, since you're all the ones who will be doing the data analysis itself, to see if you have enough to go on in order to start with that process.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. So yeah, just a couple things that come to mind. So I've taken notes throughout. Allison mentioned that next round of subcommittees probably be scheduled sometime in June. We'll probably reach out about more in the weeds types of questions about what board members would like to see as far as analyses in between then and now, just so that we're getting your input along the way on the road to actually getting the data. A question that I kind of had, that because we've been it's been brought up that COVID has been a major consideration in 2020 as far as what we're anticipating seeing with the data when it's finalized, and there have been suggestions to look at 2019 data. Is if anyone has ideas about kind of what under what circumstances within the report we'll look at 2020 data, and then what types of analyses we'll want to bring in some of the 2019 data and those analyses as well. So maybe people don't have answers for that right now. Just something to keep in mind as we get closer to the data coming in is where we'd like to make those distinctions of like, hey, reader, what you're looking at here in this section of the analyses is a snapshot of 2020 data. Keep in mind that there's a pandemic going on during this time period, right? So that's a big asterisk. And then what portions of the analyses in this section we should bring in the 2019 data, maybe in conjunction with the 2020, and look at them in aggregate, so that we kind of have a somewhat normal year of data. Also, for some of the agencies, that's another consideration for that, is that there were two different sets of agencies collecting in both of those years. There are more agencies collecting in 2020 than there were in 2019, and so some agencies won't have 2019 data. So if we do bring in the 2019 data for some of the analyses, some of the agencies won't have that information reflected there. So again, if people have ideas about that now, I'd be happy to hear about it. If not, feel free to email us at any time. And we'll, of course, bring it up as we get closer to the time when we have the data. We can talk to you all more about specific types of analyses where you'd like to see 19 data incorporated in with the 2020 data. Maybe I should pause there in case anyone has comments on that or ideas.
Well, I think for posterity, we want to document what happened over the last year. So somebody writing their dissertation 100 years from now.
Yeah.
But I do think to build on a comment from a member of the public, I think Jean Lyon had raised this, that maybe we want to be mindful of possible changes of practice that we need to think about when we interpret what we're seeing. And I thought that was one example, and I'm sure that there are many more. And so I'm not sure what the suggestion is, but I do think we just perhaps have to look at things with an eye on the special circumstances that might be leading to changes in how things are handled.
Okay. And then just another comment, I guess. As far as, yeah, we have ideas about some of the things you all have been talking about for focuses in this year's report, so we can kind of be brainstorming behind the scenes on how we might bring that to fruition, so that you all can get a draft of something to look at in the summer. So we'll keep you apprised of that progress. But it would be just because in hearing about next steps, there were a lot of different next step items, topic areas, and not all of them necessarily are related in the kind of a general sense. And so getting an idea of priority for these sections, if there are staffing issues or something like that where we can only dedicate so much resourcing to each one of these analyses, where the board is kind of leaning, or at least the subcommittee, right? It's not necessarily to say that the board as a whole will feel the same, but where the subcommittee members are most interested in seeing the analyses performed at would be helpful, although if no one has strong preferences, then we can just move forward and we'll address those issues as they come up later down the road. But I think if anyone has strong preferences, letting us know early would be better so that we can make sure that we're focusing and allocating resources appropriately in line with the board's directives. Ooh, Allison, I know that you also messaged about some questions in the chat earlier. Would this be a good time for me to go over that?
Sure, we can give answers to that quickly, or maybe round out this conversation and jump back to that, just because it looked like one or two people might want to might want to speak to what you were just asking about.
Oops, sorry, wasn't picking up on that.
Okay.
Heard silence. Didn't mean to cut anyone off.
Thoughts from my colleagues on topic areas or areas of priority? Okay, I think not hearing anything, I do have something I'd like to just kind of weigh in on, and I think it's important as we look at, I'm trying to look at this through the lens of what is important to our communities and what's important in an effort of transparency and community trust building, and using this opportunity with the RIPA report as a way to build bridges and identify needs. And when I think about that, I think about it's important for us as law enforcement and for our communities that we're providing data that is benchmarked and accurate and to the greatest extent possible, comparing a true apples to apples type comparison. And so when we look at things like stops, and that's why I've been talking about calls for service and trying to help inform the data around what our calls for service look like in our Wave 1 and Wave 2 agencies, and now Wave 3 here in 2020. And so I translate that to going back to the supervision information that was shown here, those that are on supervision. And as we evaluate those who are searched or those who are stopped who are on supervision, and it's showing a disproportionality, we know that the disproportionality also exists in our justice system across the board throughout our state. And so I just think that it's important that as we evaluate those who are stopped on supervision, whether they're searched or not, or et cetera, that we also try to identify how's that benchmark compare with the overall population of those in the agencies represented who are on supervision. And I think that's something important for our board to look at and for our report to consider. in addition to that, I mean, mental health is a significant impact throughout our state, and the needs of those who are suffering from mental illness are significant. And that's another topic area that I think is especially important for us to understand. And if we can use this data in any way, shape, or form to inform the response of law enforcement to those in crisis, then we are all better off for that enhanced response. And that to me is another important topic area.
I will put in a quick plug that the Calls for Service and Bias by Proxy Subcommittee is definitely going to be digging into responses to crisis intervention and people who interactions between people with mental health disabilities or people needing intervention or support with and looking at those interactions with law enforcement. So that will definitely be an area that the Calls for Service subcommittee will be delving into even more than they had last year. And just to continue the plug, that subcommittee meeting, just for those, it will be noticed this week, but that subcommittee meeting will be on March 9th from 2:30 to 4:30. So for those who are interested, we will be noticing that very soon.
Well, it's good. I believe that Officer Hampton's on that call, on that subcommittee. I see here from Aisha, he's on stop data, post, and also calls for service subcommittees. So, sir, thank you. Welcome to our board, and thank you for jumping in with both feet.
No problem. Thank you. So I wouldn't say selfish, but I know there's a lot of interest on my part because we are going to be participating this year. By we, I mean Anaheim. We'll be participating. So I am curious to see how it all shakes out as far as how the data is collected, what's done with the data, how it's looked at, and everything else like that. So it's a natural curiosity as well as wanting to participate. So
Glad to have you. With that, DOJ staff, anything else? I think Kevin Walker might have had something else you wanted to touch on before we adjourned.
Yes, there was a question in the chat earlier, or a series of questions in the chat earlier about the dashboards from a member of the public. So there was a question about which agencies submitted the data. I think they're talking about the student dashboard. So the agencies that are reflected in the dashboard for 2019 are the Wave 1 and 2 agencies. So the largest 15 agencies in the state. And then if you're looking at the 2018 version of the dashboard, that's going to reflect Wave 1 agencies only. So that's the largest 8 agencies in the state that are reflected in that dashboard. All of the dashboards are based on RIPA data. And then there was a question that said, do you have student stop data disaggregated by race, ethnicity, or disability status? So in the student dashboard, there are drop-down menus where you can select what identity group you'd like to break down the data for in that dashboard. So the dashboard does have that functionality, so you should be able to do that. And then there was another question. There's a requirement that all schools must collect and report data on calls to police and all school-related arrests. Are those data available? I'm not familiar with that requirement. I will say that the dashboard, which is what we were talking about at the time when this comment came through, is based on RIPA stop data. So if there's a data collection requirement independent of the RIPA stop data, it's not going to be reflected in that dashboard. These are just RIPA data collected by the Wave 1 and 2 agencies for 2019 and 2018. And so these are not agencies, these aren't data that are submitted by schools specifically. They're submitted by police agencies that may make stops on school campuses. And so that's kind of what those data are showing on that dashboard. So hopefully that answers those questions that were in the chat earlier. Sorry, I I missed them at that point in time, but I sometimes have trouble monitoring the chat and keeping track of everything that's going on here. So I think those were the questions that we missed earlier. Allison, that was it, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for putting that on my radar.
Hey, do we need a motion to move those items forward, or is that something that DOJ staff is going to bring to the board meeting and Dr. Raphael or I might present on that at our meeting in April?
So I think we'll have report backs on what the subcommittees have decided to pursue as topics you're interested in for the board meeting. And so at that time, if there's feedback from the rest of the board on other particular areas they'd like to pursue or areas that you all bring to them that they're interested in, we can have a further discussion at that time. But I think we certainly have enough to go on in terms of some of the, given that we won't have the data yet for another few months, being able to at least look into some of the research and figure out some of the breakdowns that are possible for some of this data so we can get into more of the deep dives for some of these topics that were presented today.
Okay. Any closing comments from my colleagues on the board? On the committee, rather? I guess the board, committee, whatever. Any closing comments from DOJ staff?
Yes, the one other plug I will make is that there's a policy subcommittee meeting this Friday morning, February 26th from 10 to 12 a.m. And information about that is on the RIPA website. There is also for the subcommittee members, and we can forward it to you again after this meeting, but we have the RIPA flyer that the board approved last year. So if you are able to share that with your networks and encourage people to attend the subcommittee meetings and the full board meeting, we'd appreciate it because having more public participation from both law enforcement and members of the public and researchers and others is always valuable. So we will forward that to all of you so you have it handy.
Okay, great. Well, with that, we will go ahead and adjourn our meeting. Thank you all for your time this afternoon and input. Appreciate it. And DOJ, thank you for your information and report out. As always, comprehensive, thorough, and insightful. Appreciate that. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
good evening.